language.
Hello and welcome back to the Way to Native Chronicles. Today we're going to deal with a subject that is perhaps maybe one of the most misunderstood things when it comes to setting up your rifle for hunting. And I know this partly because I do work behind a gun counter and I deal with a lot of hunters and field a lot of questions. And one of the misconceptions that people seem to labor under the most is in terms of how far away they should zero their rifle to hit dead on at. What is their sight-in distance when they go to sight in the rifle? Because the general idea with most hunters seems to be I've got to sight it in at 100 yards, or I always sight mine in at 100 yards and that's the best. And there's just no taking into account what one rifle sight-in distance should be versus another, and I think it's really just beyond the understanding of many hunters what factors play into that. So in this video I want to go into this subject, and I want to provide you with the tools that you need in order to assess this for yourself, because really it's totally dependent on what the cartridge is that you're shooting and what kind of velocities you're getting out of your particular rifle. This doesn't have to be done to high precision, but you want to have pick out a distance for your rifle to hit dead on that is suited to the cartridge that you're shooting. Because if your rifle can shoot very flat, you should be taking maximum advantage of that fact, that it doesn't have to rise very much on the mid-range in order to get to the hitting dead on. That means that if it has to rise high in order to hit dead on a certain distance, then targets mid-range from that, the bullet is going to go over them and miss it. So you don't want to sight a 30-30, let's say, to be hitting dead on at 300 yards, because when you get a shot at an animal that's 100 yards away or closer or further, you're going to shoot right over the back of that animal, and that's just no good. Most of your shots are going to probably be at 70 yards, I think, is the average. But if you get a rifle like a 243 and you sight this gun in at 275 yards, maybe even 300, depending on the type of bullet you're using. If it's sighted in at 300 yards, it shoots so flat, you can actually kill everything in between and further out than 300 yards just by aiming dead on. Whereas if you took this rifle and you sighted it in to hit dead on at 100 yards, you aim if you get a 300-yard shot and you think it's only 100 yards or 200 yards, you're going to shoot right underneath it, even though you have a beautiful flat shooting cartridge and a very accurate rifle capable of doing the job. Because you sighted in too close, you're just wasting that gun. But 30-30, it's a bush gun, it's a short-range weapon anyways. Sighting that in at 100, you could probably get sighted in at 150 too, and it'll still have a mid-range height that it's going to still hit in the vital zone. So this is kind of part of the concept here that we have to deal with. See here what I've got. I've got this 8-inch diameter plate, and that for many people will represent the kill zone on a white-tailed deer. You will aim in the center of it, but really if the bullet hit 4 inches high, you're still going to kill that deer. If it hit 4 inches low, you're still going to kill that deer. So you may have no idea what the distance is, but in the case of a flat shooting rifle, if you sighted it in at a farther distance and you aim dead on, you hit a little bit higher or lower, you're still going to kill the animal. So you want to stay within this diameter, that kill zone. Whereas if you're going for something like a moose, now you're dealing with a vital zone that's actually quite a bit larger. This is a 12-inch diameter plate, and if I hit it dead center, that's fine, you know. But if I hit it up here, the moose isn't going to really notice much difference. He's going to die either way, or hit down here, because that's the size of its vital area. You just have to hit somewhere in this 12-inch diameter kill zone and you're going to bring that animal down. So it does depend to some extent on what kind of animal you're hunting for, and it depends on the type of firearm you're using, the cartridge more specifically. What kind of trajectory are you going to get from the cartridge that you're using? And really most people have no idea. They look at the box and they see the drop values on the back of their factory ammo box, and it doesn't really help them out that much. But the resources are there available for you to figure these things out. Nowadays we have online ballistics calculators. We also have spreadsheets to help visualize things, but really the only thing you need is an online ballistics calculator. And it's not like you have to take this thing out to the field with you in order to hunt. The idea is to pick out a distance that you should sight your rifle in to hit dead on at, that's going to maximize the performance of that cartridge. That distance is often summed up with the term point blank distance. Now the point blank distance is not exactly, let's say if we're sighting in to hit at 300 yards, it's not 300 is your point blank. It's a little more than 300 because it's going to be also taking into account how far past 300 the bullet can go and still stay within this kill zone or this kill zone. So it does depend on the size of kill zone that you choose. Now what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you the software, the screen capture of how I figure this stuff out. I'm going to just do it for 2 quick examples, because really it doesn't help to show 12 different examples of every different kind of cartridge, because the point is that they're all different anyway. So you're going to have to figure this out for yourself. It'll take like 5 minutes to do, and it could benefit you for a lifetime if you know how to do this. So I'm talking even to the older fellows, you can do this. Let's get started on the video showing how the software is used. Since different cartridges have different trajectories, in order to find out the optimum sight-in distance for your particular rifle and cartridge combination, the thing we have to do is we have to get a handle on what that trajectory is, and paying special attention to what the mid-range trajectory is, because when we're hunting we don't want to have that bullet rising more than can be accepted for hitting the kill zone of an animal, and that amount of bullet rise depends of course on the type of animal that you're hunting. For a deer you might be wanting to keep it to an 8-inch diameter circle of where you're aiming your rifle. For a moose you could go quite a bit larger. So I'm going to run you through a little example here, and the easiest way to do this stuff is to use an online ballistics calculator. And in this example I'm going to use the one from gundata.org, but there's many others, so just go to Google and type in ballistics calculator in there and choose one that you like. They all work well, but we'll go with this one here. It's a pretty simple generic type of calculator and very easy to use. So in this example what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out for a 243 Winchester what is the best distance to use for your sight-in. And I want to demonstrate also in this example using this online calculator in conjunction with a spreadsheet, Excel. Now, you may not have that. You'll definitely have this online calculator at your disposal, but if you have Excel, I'm going to show you a way to use that in conjunction with the results that you get from this calculator, and also especially for the purposes of this video, the graphs I can generate using that data will be very illustrative of the concepts involved here. So let's go ahead here and let's see if we can find something that approximates what we are after. So I'm looking for a 243 Winchester, right? Okay, so let's take that. Now I know in the case of my hand loads that I'm using a 100 grain Federal Sierra Game King boat tail spire point. So that's kind of nice and handy that it's in there. If you don't have your exact bullet, just get the closest thing, and you can see it has a ballistic coefficient of 0.43. Now I know from my chronograph testing that I'm actually getting a little better velocity than what they figure the factory ammo does, or whatever their best guess is. I'm getting on average about 3,020 feet per second, and of course the bullet is 100 grains. Now if you don't have a perfect match in terms of these things, you're just going to have to get it as close as you can. For the main things to keep in mind are that ballistics coefficient and the weight of the bullet. But basically it comes down to the ballistics coefficient, and I should say also the velocity. Now if you don't have a chronograph, you're just going to have to go from factory data or whatever source you can. The ballistics coefficients don't vary that much if you're choosing a bullet that's of similar construction and shape. So the better you can do, the better you can do, right? So now we've got that part set up. I'm going to go to advanced options. In the case of this calculator, they all work a little bit different, but it's roughly the same sort of thing. So here I'm going to take, for an example, I'm going to see if I could sight this rifle in. If I sighted it in at 300 yards, what do you think it'll do at mid-range that's around 150? Well, let's punch in 300 here. I don't have to worry too much about this stuff. You know, there's your average scope height. If it was open sights, you'd be a little lower, but that's pretty piddling. So let's bring the data out to a 500 yard mark, and let's have the distance step be at the default of one data point every 50 yards. So we're going to have a few results come up here. You can fill with all this other stuff, but really for hunting purposes, we're hunting in all kinds of different conditions, and we're not bench rest shooting and stuff like that. We're hunting, right? So we want to get it in the neighborhood, and really our main purpose is to figure out what kind of trajectory we're going to get with our load. So I'm going to click calculate here, and let's see if this thing goes here. Okay, let's get some data. Hopefully my page hasn't expired. That might be the case too. Let's see here. Come on. Oh. I guess I'm gonna have to redo this. Okay, let's go over here. Oh, there we go. So they present a nice little graph here. We're going to replicate that ourselves, and I've got my results sitting right here. So let's just take this data, and this is what's of interest. Okay, so we got a sight in a 0 of 300, and you can see here that the drop shows 0.0164 for the drop. That means it's basically sighted in to hit dead on at 300 as I've set up the calculation, and I'm interested in how high does that bullet have to rise in order to loop down onto the bullseye at 300. According to this, it's 4.68 something inches. So let's take a look at this. Now the real critical number here is at 4.6 inches. And you can look at some different scenarios of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this data and I'm going to copy it, Control C, and I'm going to bring up a spreadsheet. Let's see, let's get this guy going here. Now let's just paste that. Oh, I didn't want to do that. No, just a paste like that, that's not good. So I'll go Alt backspace. Let's do a paste. I'm going to right click on that first cell and I'm going to go paste. You can see as I move my mouse over there, it kind of shows me what I'm going to get. I don't want any formatting along with it, so I'm just going to paste that in there like that. Okay. So here we have our basic columns. Really, there's, for some reason, it's inserting some columns that we don't need. We don't need this one either. And actually, I'm not interested in this stuff, so let's take that out of there and just clean this up a little bit. Now we have our basic results. So this column is the amount of drop the bullet will experience, either going above the line of sight or below it as it travels on its path. And this column is the velocity of the bullet at those various distances. The distances are right here, right? And this is the energy of the bullet that it retains over those various distances. Now, one thing I'd like to do here is I don't like this decimal point stuff. You know, when you're referring to some data for the field, you don't really think in, at least I don't think in terms of decimal, 4.6 whatever. I'd like to have it in fractions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little arrow here, and if this thing ever responds for me, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to choose fraction, and let's go with quarters. Turn that into, one. It's going to round it up because we don't need it all that precise, right? I can maybe center this data. So now we have 1 3/4 inches, 3 3/4 inches, 4 3/4 at that mid-range distance, and all the way up to 500 yards if you want to be so crazy to take a shot that far. So let's take these two columns. Well, let's see here. Let's just grab this guy here and this one. Let's make a little chart out of this. Let's see, go to charts here. The computer's running really slow here, but okay, let's try a scatter chart. And I'm gonna take a look at this here. As I float my mouse over there, I say, okay, that's the kind of chart I like. Let's just make this page bigger, and let's work with this chart. So this chart is using that information that we derived here, right? And we can stretch that out a little bit. Excel makes this stuff easy to work with. If I wanted to fiddle with this a little bit, I have these little controls here. So if I was to click that, then I get some choices. If I was to click this, then I can apply colors and things like that to it. This computer's running really slow. Okay, but like we could go to a black chart, for instance. Just to make things stand out a little bit. Let's see, what else could we do? Let's click on this and decide we want to have some titles for the axis, and I want to have some labels on this data. That's important to have. So that should be good enough. So what we can see here now is we have our chart, and our distances. Here's a 0, here's 50 meters, or 50 yards, and 100 yards, 150 yards, 4 3/4 inches rise, and down to 200 and 300. And the point I want to stress with this video, or this portion of the video, is I want you to pay attention to the fact, what is the killing range of this cartridge when sighted in to hit at 300 yards. You notice that if I want to hit a target that just maybe a little bit, this would still kill a deer. It's maybe getting a little bit high for that, but you should be able to kill a deer anywhere from 0 by aiming dead on, right out to almost 300, a good 350 yards. That gives you a very broad range of latitude to work with, because in the field you don't know always exactly what that distance is to target. So what if we were to sight our rifle in at a different distance? Because a lot of people say, well, you should just sight your rifle in at 100 yards. The stand I'm taking in this video is that's very wrong-headed. In fact, even sighting this rifle at 200 yards, I think you're cheating yourself out of some of the potential of your cartridge. Especially in the case of hunting moose, this is perfectly acceptable. You aim dead on at a moose at 150 yards, and if you hit him at 4 3/4 inches high of where you aimed, that animal's still going down. So, this is going to cover a lot of sins in terms of errors in distance calculation. And if you have to start reaching out, you're out a little bit in your distance estimation, you're still going to get it right out to 350 yards. And if it is standing out there at 400 or a little further, and you think it's 300 or 350, then you might start saying, okay, I'll aim a little bit high. Then you're going to get them still, even though you're not precisely aimed, estimating the distance precisely, because who has time for that in the field? Okay, so let's go back to our calculator. I'm going to create first a new spreadsheet. So we'll accept some data. Let's do it for the 100-yard sight-in instead. Okay, so here we have another sheet set up. Let's go back to this calculator, reset, and try again. Okay, I let my slow computer here work. And what do we got here? Back to square one. Let's let these fields populate. There we go. So what we want again is we want the 243. And scroll down here a little bit. Where is it? Come on. 243 Winchester. And we're looking for that same bullet again, which is our Game King 100 grain. And let's skip the same velocity, 3020. The bullet weight is right. Go to advanced options. And let's choose a 0 of 100 yards. And the same kind of increments in distance. And calculate this guy too. Okay, let's see here. Okay, look at ourselves a little chart here. We got some more data, and we can see, look at that 300-yard mark. Now we're almost getting close to a foot low on the target. So yeah, it's great if you're aiming dead on at 300 yards, right? At 100 yards, you're hitting right on. But already at 200 yards, you're 3 inches low, right? And if that target is at 300, you're gonna miss it. And honestly, you know, if you're out in the field and you see an animal, it may look like it's 200 yards away, but it could very easily be 300 yards away, especially when you're looking across a bit of a valley or something like that. So, man, you're just cheating yourself out of a lot of capability of your cartridge if you aim that set that 243 to hit dead on at 100 yards. It's just a waste of good bullet potential. But just to visualize it, let's pop this data into the spreadsheet as well. Now, this is not something that you have to do for yourself. I'm doing this more for illustrative purposes, because in Excel I can generate a chart and I can show that to you here in this video. If I can ever get my chart come up. Okay, here we go. So let's right click on there, let's paste in this fashion here. Let's clean it up a little bit, take that column out, let's take this column out, and let's take these guys out too. Okay, so now let's convert this to the different number format, so it doesn't hurt to go over this a second time for you if you're a little bit new to using Excel anyways, right? You can always refer back to this video if you want to see how it's done. And just go into different number formats, find if I center it, looks a little bit better too. And now we have our different drop distances. And let's generate another chart. Okay, I'm going to go to this, the data highlighted, and I go to insert, and I go to map charts, and I'm going for a scatter chart, and using the scatter with smooth lines and markers chart. Okay, so now we've got a very different chart here, right? If I make it look the same as the other guy. Let's see here. Boy, this thing is slow. It's probably because I'm running the screen capture software at the same time as I'm doing this. Yeah, let's go with that black guy there. Okay. And let's put on some data. Okay. And stretch this thing out a little bit. Let's see what we got. Let's bring it down here a little bit. Okay, so now we're looking at a trajectory like this. So if you're sitting here at 300 yards, you're shooting way low, more than 11 inches low, or a little bit more than 11 inches. So here we have our there's our 300. It's about 11 inches low. Okay, at 300 yards. You're gonna miss that deer. If you thought he was at 200 and he was actually at 300, maybe even thought he was at 100. You know, you just aim dead on, you miss him. So that's the way things work out in the field. You don't know for sure what distances you're dealing with unless you're carrying a laser to measure those things. But all that kind of stuff and notes and things like that, it's really not practical in the field. When you're hunting, your opportunities come up on you very quickly and last for very brief periods of time often. So if you have a rifle that's sighted in, so you can just pick it up, and as long as you know, it's in the case of the first example, as long as you're pretty sure that that animal is 350 yards or less than that close to you, you can just aim at the vital, at the kill zone, and pull the trigger, and you got them. No thinking about it. You can focus your attention on other things and get the job done. Because we're not trying to get high scores in target shooting. We're trying to get meat in the freezer, right? So you want to do another one where we do a 200 yard. Maybe that'll be start to get a little bit repetitious. But let's just take another look at here. Maybe I'll just kind of minimize this a bit so we have it sort of on the side, and see what these two charts look like, just for a refresher. So here's the other one for 300. We're looking at quite a different scenario here with these two. So here we have our 300. We're hitting right on. We're killing everything right out to 350 yards here, right? This one here, just a waste of a good flat shooting cartridge, in my opinion. This guy here, if you want to take a 400 yard shot and you got a pretty good idea of the distance, you can just raise your sights a little bit. It's sighted in at 300. It's going to hit 10 inches low at that distance. I know I've got a deer with a hard shot at 460 yards once, and I just raised the sights a bit, having pretty closely figured out the distance. Not exactly, but I was close enough in my distance estimation to not shoot over it or under it, because of the fact that I had the rifle sighted into 300 yards. So that's basically the illustration of how to use this ballistics calculator software to help you out in figuring out what for you is the optimum distance to sight in your rifle. Okay, now we've taken a look at the process for figuring out what the ideal distance is to sight in your rifle, depending on your cartridge. Also taking into consideration what the size of kill zone it is that you need to hit. We're looking at 300 yards in the previous bit here. Maybe we want to shorten that down to 275 yards. You can kind of take a look at that. 200 yards is too close. That's wasting the ballistics of a 243 in the example we're using. So let's say we're looking at 275 yards, and we want that to be our zero distance to achieve a point blank range that is 275 plus, you know, another 50 yards, something like that. Now some of you might be thinking, yeah, well, that's all fine and dandy, but I don't have a range that goes out to 275 yards. So what do I do now? Do I have to find some place to do this? Well, you know, ideally you would, but it's not absolutely necessary, because as I began this video by saying, this is not super high precision. Let's keep our eyes on the ball here, that what we're doing is hunting. We're not trying to win a shooting competition by getting the smallest groups or getting all the shots as close as possible to the bullseye. We're trying to set up a rifle so it's going to be very effective and very deadly out in the field at various ranges, used very quickly, and with dubious range estimation methods involved. In other words, just guessing. So when we're talking about the sight-in distance is zero distance, you don't have to be exactly, because after all, the animal is not going to step out to certain increments of distance for you to go by. You're just trying to get it in the most effective ballpark, let's call it that. So if you're going to sight in your rifle for an ideal distance of, let's say, 275 yards, let's take a look at what we were studying before on the ballistics calculator, and I'm going to show you how you can get around that problem very quickly. Okay, we're going to take another kick at the can here and do some calculations for this load that we were looking at before, the 243 Winchester with a 100 grain bullet. And instead of going with 300 yards, let's go for a zero range of 275. And we'll tackle the problem of how are we going to sight this load in for 275 yards if we don't have a range that extends out to 275 yards. Wait for my ballistics calculator to do its little thing here. There's our chart and here's our data. So what we got again is like before, we have, well actually we have 275 being the 0 point. That's between 250 and 300. I could have chose 25-yard increments so that we would see that zero there. But the main thing that I want to show here is that even though I don't have a 275-yard range, if I have, let's say, a 100-yard range, I can still do this. And just do that by taking a look at this 100-yard figure, and that 3.1, that is the distance above the bullseye that you want your bullets to hit if you have want to have your rifle sighted in to hit dead on at 275 yards. As I said before, people will say, okay, yeah, but you got to test this out at 275 yards to be really sure. Yes, I know that, but if you don't have that facility or at your disposal, I would just go right ahead, make sure your windage and everything is right on the money for 100 yards, because and go with this, because as I said, this is not a matter of being able to precisely hit the bullseye at perfect elevation at your chosen sight-in range. This is getting your rifle into its optimal range that it should be set at, so it should be set at 275 yards. If it was zeroed at 280 yards or 270 or even 260, really at the end of the day it's not going to make any difference. So if you just have a 100-yard range at your disposal and you want to take full advantage of your cartridge that you're using, so that you have a very small mid-range height, in this case 3.7 inches, so it's under 4 inches. That's going to satisfy anybody, I think, when it comes to whitetail. Then set your impacts to be a little over 3 inches at 100 yards, maybe even 3.2 or something like that, because you got a little bit of wiggle room here. So that's basically how you handle in your sighting, and just in case some of you haven't guessed this already. Okay, now we've seen how that's done. If you like, you should be able to take whatever cartridge it is that you're using and plug that into the ballistics calculator and figure out what for you is the optimum sight-in distance for your cartridge. And it depends, as I said before, on what is that size of kill zone you want to restrict your bullet to, and it depends on the trajectory of your bullet. Now, there's some who may say, oh, I don't like that the bullet will hit a little higher, a little low. And I would just remind you that in the field, you're not going to know the exact distance either. It's not like you're going to walk around with a tape measure and measure up to the deer and say, just stay there for a second. I got to figure, oh, 80 yards. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to be an inch high if I aim dead on at you at 80 yards. And by that time, that deer isn't going to be around. So we're not doing precision shooting in the field anyways. We're concerned about hitting that kill zone. So there's always going to be a little bit of variance from where your crosshairs are. And I'd also want to emphasize from the previous portion of this video where we were looking at the graphs, when you see that that trajectory chart, you notice at the end it starts to fall off steeper and steeper at the end, and that's where your things really go haywire when you sight in the rifle at too close of a distance, because then that little bit of distance estimation error that you make, if you sighted in your rifle too close, is going to make a huge difference compared to a guy who sighted in his rifle to the maximum point blank it's capable of. That guy, if he misjudges the distance a bit, even though he's holding a little bit high, he's far more likely to drop that bullet into the kill zone and make an ethical kill on the animal. That said, again, I think another thing that's worthy of mentioning in this video, and it's also based on my experience interacting with many different shooters and hunters over the years, is let's not get too carried away when it comes to long shots. I hear a lot of people talking about, I need a 7mm mag, or 300 Win mag, because I need to make my shots out to 600 yards and stuff like that. Hold on, folks. There are not many people that can ethically take a shot in the field at an elk or a moose that's 600 yards away. Let's not fool ourselves. You have just a little bit of wind, it's going to blow that bullet off enough to shoot it through the guts, even though you're aiming perfectly. There's so many factors involved. There are only a few elite shooters that can consistently pull that kind of shooting off, especially in field conditions, especially when you're estimating distances, especially when the wind is blowing at various speeds through the range. Those kind of shots, in my opinion, are unethical. Restrict yourself to going out to about 300 yards, maybe a little further if you're a good shot. If you're not all that great of a shot, restrict yourself to shorter distances than that if you want to be ethical about it. And this also comes down to assessing yourself, what your real capabilities are. Not when your friends are standing around or when you're telling stories, but maybe going out to the range yourself and take some shots kneeling and standing at targets at different distances, and see, can you put 10 out of 10 shots into this kill zone at 100 yards standing? If you can't, you should be taking a rest against a tree or kneeling or doing something, whatever you have to do to hold that gun steady enough to make shots that accurate. So this is not all just about sight and distance. This is also about considering that kill zone and assessing your own capabilities wisely. So having said that about the 300 yard, maybe up to 400 yard limit that most capable shooters can handle on a good day, that actually kind of narrows down the hunting rifle choices to making 30-06s and 270s and 243s really perfectly adequate rifles. We don't need those Magnum cartridges so much for killing the animal. A lot of people think it's just the Magnums are for you got to hit that animal hard enough. Well, yeah, if you're going to shoot out to 500 yards, you do have to be hitting them with some energy. But really, the Magnum utility, in my opinion, is more for the flat shooting capability it has, so that you can keep your mid-range trajectory within the kill zone, and the faster, the flatter it shoots, the more you can stretch out that point-blank range. But if that point-blank range is 400 yards, and you shouldn't really be taking shots that far, then it kind of negates the advantage and the usefulness of having a Magnum. So really, 270s, 30-06s, rifles like that are fully adequate for all the big game that we hunt here in North America. So that's about all we have to say here on that subject today. I hope this video has been of help to you, and if you have some questions, pop them into the comments section and I'll get to you on that. You can review this video if you want a reminder on how to use the software involved. The support that you give to this channel is really critical to it keeping running, so I want to encourage you, if you haven't already, to click the subscribe button. Click also the bell notification if you want to get notifications when new videos come out. And having said that, I want to wish you God's blessing. Until next time, from the Weighted Native Chronicles.
Lots.